Aurora Sandifer, and I will be doing my music presentation on a song that you featured in one of your lectures, Ain't Gonna Let Nobody. And I'm going to be comparing and contrasting that to If I Believe You by the 1975. So I chose to feature Ain't Gonna Let Nobody Turn Me Around because I consider it a song that you can use for the basis of what a gospel sound is, what a gospel song means, what kind of elements are featured in this song that make us think of church, make us think of this kind of, divine environment. So it has a lot of features that we talk about with gospel music included in this song. So I thought that it would be important to kind of compare that with the other song that I chose. Another thing to recognize is that I'm using a live version from the Howard Gospel Choir. I'll be providing links so that you can see what I'm talking about when I include time points, time frames. But it's a really good performance. I've watched it a few times now, so I think it's really amazing, and I think they did a great job with the song. So that's what I'll be using. I know that it was popularized in the civil rights movement. I tried to find where exactly it came from. I couldn't find too many specific details, so I'm just going to assume that it was passed down orally, um, and we have a version of it today. We'll be comparing that to, like I said, If I Believe You by the 1975. The 1975 is a pop group, pop indie, alternative, whatever category they feel they best fit into, but nowhere near gospel is the point. I chose to compare this song because the lyrics of the song contrast completely with the sound. So the lyrics, the 1975 is actually it's a bit of an anti-gospel, some has called it, because he's talking about his atheism and or his agnostic beliefs. But he's writing that in a churchy gospel sound. So I wanted to go in and analyze why is it still sound gospel? What elements is he using? And what did they use to modernize it? Because it's not a gospel song. So what did they change? What did they keep? And how did it turn into the song that we have today? So starting out with Ain't Gonna Let Nobody Turn Me Around. Again, I'm doing a performance from the Howard Gospel Choir. One of the important elements of gospel is that it starts with rhythm. And around 18 seconds, it's very faint, but you can hear a metronome start. So I know this isn't the same as a rhythm, but it is. It's to keep time, and this comes in before any instruments, any voices, anything. So I'll play that. Hopefully you can hear it. There we go. Um, I'm actually going to keep playing that so you can listen to. Cool. So the first thing that is the most noticeable about it is that it's all a cappella, which is really great. They have a really great sound for a cappella. I know that's really hard. So while it's not as obvious because of its being a cappella, it has the beat accentuated on 1 and 3, which is a feature that we see a lot in gospel music. So it starts with that solo, as you heard, saying, Ain't gonna let nobody turn me round, turn me round, turn me round. Ain't gonna let nobody turn me round. Um, keep on walking, keep on talking, marching on to freedom land. So this is important because even with these lyrics, and even though the choir is not singing the solo, you still hear them jumping in back and forth with these same words. And because the soloist is providing a more ornamented version of the melody while the choir sings it in the background with the same words as well, it creates that heterophonic sound that we talk about at the beginning of the semester. This also creates a contrast between the solo and the choir. And this is something that we saw a lot in concertos. Um, the soloists going, playing, and then the rest of the orchestra joining in soon afterwards. It's very interesting that that trend made it all the way over to gospel, and we still see it today in pop music even. So another thing that stood out to me about the solos is the focus on the individual interpretation. The solos are able to sing however they please, and I don't know for sure, but it seems as if they are improvising, um, singing ad lib, singing what they want, and this allows for more individual expression rather than feeling like you have to stick to certain notes. This is nothing that we see in gospel because it's all about expressing yourself, expressing how you feel, and in most cases, expressing your love for a God. So the next verse goes on and it says, "Ain't gonna let Mississippi turn me round." And it's a repetition of the same lyrics and even the same motives. Ba 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 ba, and that is repeated. And the only word that's changed is nobody, and now it's turned to Mississippi. So here we see a change of, oh, I'm sorry, a repetition of lyrics mostly, a repetition of melody and motive. So that's another thing that we see a lot in gospel, and it's a very simple motive. Like I just demonstrated, it just very simple intervals jumping back and down from notes and repetition. And one of the reasons that that was implemented was so that everybody could join in when they were singing, whether it was in um, in Africa or during slavery in America or the civil rights movement in America. This was so that everybody could join in, everybody could sing, we could all catch on to the lyrics, and it could be a communal experience. So that is the reason for that. I love this performance. It's really good. I wish I could play all of it, but the link will be there. So moving on to If I Believe You, performed by the 1975. We see a lot of these elements even in this band that is, pop, indie. So around 12 seconds is when it starts. I chose a live performance for this video as well since the Howard Gospel Choir was performing live, so I figured it would be better to put them on an even playing field. But both songs are available on all platforms. Around 12 seconds, it starts with very dissonant chords, and you hear these jazz-like licks. So let's see if I can play some of that if you can hear it. So as you just heard, around 30 seconds, the percussion enters first. After we have these dissonant chords and these licks, it might be hard to hear in this performance, but they're there. And I think that this was really interesting because besides from the intro, I kind of see it as separate from the song, but the percussion comes in first, and that's something that we saw in the gospel, where the metronome came in to set all the instruments to the same beat. So, yes, so even though, so at this point we already have an instrument coming in, right? And that's different from what we're used to seeing, so that's one way that the 1975 has modernized this kind of gospel. They already have keys playing, they already have um, a drum set coming in, and you can see on the video it's a full drum set, so. But at the same time, they do have the percussion coming in first, so that is an element of gospel that we did see in Ain't Gonna Let Nobody. So I'm going to skip ahead to 115. And I just think that one's important because you hear another jazz-like lick that he's featuring here. Yeah. So I just wanted to include that because that was kind of unprecedented. Not it was not seen. You couldn't really tell it was coming. So there's that. So now we're gonna move forward to the chorus, is where you really start to see the similarities coming through, in which the main singer, he sings a line, and he has a chorus. Actually, it was only about 4 or 5 people singing with him, but they have these very gospel-like sounding voices, and they're joining in with him and backing off intermittently. So let me play a bit of that for you. So that's a really cool thing that he does. Another thing with the chorus is you hear that same rhythm repeated 3 times. So and if I believe you, would that make it stop? If I told you I need you, is that what you want? Yeah, so he keeps going with that rhythm for the majority of the chorus. So I'm going to be moving on to verse 2, the second verse, which is very interesting because at this point he starts to layer on instruments, and they become more amplified, and in fact they become essential to the song. You can hear guitar, keys, drums, his vocals, and the choir's vocals, and a guitar bass. And the way that he's layering these makes it sound almost as if it were a choir singing. Um, they're playing all different notes, but they're all supporting each other and harmonizing, rather than playing the same note, just with different timbres. Sorry, I always struggle with that word. So, also the combination of instruments that he chooses is very reminiscent of the blues and R&B period, that specific group. Is where we first started to see that was around the blues period. So interesting that he includes that. Around 252 is very interesting because he has the guitar and the saxophone start to play solos. And the way that they're playing almost sounds like these solos the from the Howard Gospel Choir, where they were playing very ornamented and complicated rhythms and melodies over the main melody, while the rest of the band continues to play the same thing. So I think it's interesting how he has the instruments almost act as voices here, and that's one of the ways that he modernizes it. So at 341, he has a saxophone solo just by themselves. Well, the rest of the band is still playing, so that's just another instance of that. And then at the very end, he includes this coda. It starts around 409, and at the coda, he just keeps repeating the same lyrics. If I'm lost, then how can I find myself? For the most part, it has the same melody every time that he sings it, but he switches it up a bit because he has the ability to do that. And while he's singing that, he kind of allows for every instrument to explore the melody, and you see that all of them kind of start to play what they want. They play ad-lib. So this is another thing that was very popular in gospel and that we even saw in the previous video that I shared. So even though he provides a steady foundation with the drums and maybe the bass, the rest of the band is playing on top of that and varying the melody. They're playing with the melody, they're communicating back and forth. So it really puts emphasis on the type of the communication and expression that gospel really aimed for. So it's interesting to see this here in this song that was written in 2016 from this indie band. So yeah, and then at 5:56, you actually see in the live performance, if it interests you, you see him get up onto one of the platforms and he starts praying, which is very ironic considering what the song is talking about, but it shows how these songs evoke specific emotions into people who are listening to it. Makes us think of church. So that is going into If I Believe You, comparing and contrasting it with Ain't Gonna Let Nobody Turn Me Around. I thought it was very interesting to compare and contrast. Hope you enjoyed this, and thank you for listening.